Hello everybody, my name is Sohan Govindaraju, and welcome back to our standard deviation lesson part 2. So our guiding question for today's lesson is, what are the applications in which standard deviation can be used in the real world? So just to recap from part 1, if you haven't already, go ahead and watch the part 1 video as it explains the procedure to solve standard deviation by hand using an example problem, and we confirm that answer with a standard deviation calculator. We'll be going further into some of those concepts a little bit today. So, going into the answer for the guiding question, I should say, is for the applications for standard deviation. Here are 3 listed examples that I have of fields in which standard deviation is utilized. So, real estate, for example, if a client is interested in buying a certain house and wants to check the price range on the two, he would use a standard deviation to understand the variability between a certain house and another house and figure out which is in the optimal price range for him to buy. In another example, academia, if the teacher wants to understand the distribution of test and final scores, then he would use a standard deviation to see what is the distribution, what is the range in which students are performing in a test. And another final example that I have on this is stocks. Stocks have a lot of variability and change. So standard deviation is useful when you try to find the mean and the change in the mean in that. All right. So the next part of our lesson is answering what is the 68, 95, and 99.7 curve. Well, this is known as the bell curve because of its shape. All right, so first thing I kind of notice when I'm looking at this curve here is the fact that it's really symmetrical, right? If I were to draw a line through it, it looks the same. If I were to flip it on, it looks the same on both sides. Now, this line here represents mu. Now, remember, mu is mean, which we've learned in part 1 of this lesson. And as you notice here, you see this little +1, +2, +3, -1, -2, and -3. Well, these represent the number of standard deviations spots away from mu. This is 1 standard deviation away. This is 2 standard deviations away. This is 3 standard deviations away. You have -1 standard deviations away, -2 standard deviations away, and -3 standard deviations away. So, between -1 standard deviation away and 1 standard deviation away, you can find approximately 68% of all the data points. Between -2 standard deviations away and 2 standard deviations away, find 95%. And between -3 standard deviations away and 3 standard deviations away, you could find 99.7%. Well, we would expect this to be 100. Expect this to be 100. Since 100 means that we have the full amount is covered, but it's not. What happens to the 0.3% that is missing? Well, in the case that our data point is not in the -3 standard deviations away from the mean and the 3 standard deviations away from the mean, if it's not in that range, then it's in the 0.3% range. So we have 0.15% away here, and we have 0.15% here. Since you have 0.15% on this side, 0.15% on this side, and it evens out. And when you add them together, that represents the 0.3%. All right, so just to recap here, this is a normal standard deviation curve. This bell curve is normal. However, based upon your data, it does not need to be a normal standard deviation curve. Based upon your data, it can be skewed to the right or skewed to the left, hence making it not normal. All right, so to conclude, we've talked about 3 fields in which standard deviation is used. There are numerous fields in which standard deviations could be used, for example, in research, etc. So the 68, 95, and 99.7 curve, also known as a bell curve, represents a normal standard deviation situation. All right. Well, that's the lesson for today. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.